James Rattray, the cricket-loving grammar school boy from Stirling, who founded one of 19th century Dunedin's great commercial firms. Tracking the origin stories of Otago's pioneers can be tricky. It usually involves scratching around among incomplete records, trying to stitch together a history for them and making assumptions about their motivations for coming to Otago that honestly can be hard to verify. But that's not the case for James Rattray. He did us a big favour by writing a short autobiography for his children in the 1880s. It gives us all the information we might need about where he came from and how he ended up in Dunedin. It reveals, for instance, that the family's origins were here in Perthshire near Blairgowrie at a substantial estate called Craighall. It had been occupied by Rattrays since the 11th century. They lost possession, however, after supporting the unsuccessful risings by the Jacobites in 1707 and 1745. And a lingering sense of resentment about this had been passed down through the generations. James Rattray would actually call his home in Dunedin Craighall. After the last Jacobite rebellion in 1745, James Rattray's newly married great-grandparents had re-established themselves here at Rossie near Longfawnan in Perthshire, where the family was to remain for generations. James's grandfather, however, left the farming to his brothers while he became a carpenter in nearby Dundee. His son, also called James, joined him in the carpentry business. But when war broke out with France in 1793, he signed up with the Dumbarton Fencibles, serving with them for 7 years in Ireland, including during the suppression of the 1798 Irish Rebellion. James Sr. returned to Dundee when his term of service was over to find his parents dead and the business wound up. So he relocated to Stirling and started over as a timber merchant. He married the daughter of a Dundee linen manufacturer, and together they produced 7 children, of whom our James was the 6th, born in 1827. James Rattray had a solid education in Stirling, enjoying 9 years of schooling from the age of 6 to 15, which, as he notes in his memoir, cost his parents exactly £8, 14 shillings. He also recalled the day in 1842 when he walked directly from his old grammar school in Castle Wynd, all alone, with my heart in my boots, to take up a post as junior clerk at the National Bank of Scotland, then located in this fine old building just off Baker Street. He was bound to a 5-year apprenticeship with no pay for the first 2 years and a very modest salary for the next 3. James earned early promotions, however, and did night classes to extend his education. The bank shifted him to Glasgow for a few years, during which he boarded out here at Ballahouston, what used to be Ballahouston Farm on the road to Paisley. While living here, he enjoyed new opportunities for socialising, playing cricket, debating, practising the violin. He also used to regularly walk the 40-kilometre journey home to visit his family. It was during his time at Glasgow that James soured on a Scottish banking career. It paid shabbily, he thought, and offered little opportunity for advancement. Instead, he set his sights on eventually becoming an independent merchant. But in the meantime, like many young men, he was stirred by news of gold strikes in California and then Victoria. Australia seemed the better option, since James had an elder brother living in Sydney, whose letters home extolled the opportunities available there. In 1853, he set sail for Melbourne, accompanied by an older sister and her family. James spent a few months fossicking on the Victorian goldfields, but had little success. He quickly relocated to Sydney, where he easily found work as a banker. Over the next few years, he moved back and forth between banking and commercial jobs, and between Sydney and Melbourne, working hard, earning good pay and steadily increasing his work experience and his savings. His last post in Australia was at Geelong, working for Dalgetty's, a stock and station agency who were looking to expand their business into New Zealand. In August 1860, James Rattray was dispatched to Otago to open a branch of the firm there under the name Dalgety, Rattray and Company. The 33-year-old was a full partner in the enterprise. It was the most important move he ever made, and as Rattray recorded in his memoir, it fixed me for life. He began the business in a newly built store here on the corner of Hope and Carroll Street, which was then called Walker Street. A few months later, a young Irish woman visiting from Canterbury entered the store to wait there for some friends. James was smitten, and 2 months later, he proposed. He and Kate Aylmer were married later that year in Akaroa, where her father was the Anglican minister. Thereafter, the Presbyterian James became an Anglican, and he was one of the founding members of the St Matthew's congregation here in Stafford Street. In 1870, Dalgety decided to amalgamate all his Australian and New Zealand operations and run them from a single office in London. Now, James Rattray was not impressed at all with this scheme, since the success of Dalgety's Otago branch was entirely due to his own efforts. But given the depressed nature of pastoralism in Otago at the time, he had no option but to comply. 4 years later, however, he broke with Dalgety and set up on his own, fulfilling his lifelong ambition to be an independent merchant. Originally operating from a site here in Bond Street, J. Rattray & Co. became one of the key merchant firms in Dunedin, in the heart of what we now call the warehouse precinct, when Dunedin was at its height as the import-export centre of New Zealand. As his business fortunes prospered, James Rattray built himself a fine home which he called Craighall, here on a 3-acre section in Mornington, used to stand over there, where he and Kate brought up their 10 children, one other child having died in infancy. In due course, his only surviving son joined him in partnership as James Rattray & Son, and the business endured as a limited liability company right to the end of the 20th century, although the head office had moved to Christchurch in 1975. James Rattray died at Craighall in 1905, aged 78. He had never played much of a part in public affairs, but he was one of those businessmen, those entrepreneurs in the wake of the gold rushes who'd really made Dunedin's reputation as New Zealand's commercial capital. His contemporaries remembered him more for his sporting interests, having been one of the founders of cricket in Dunedin and an enthusiastic lawn bowler. Best of all, he was an immigrant who had pursued his dreams right around the globe and achieved his life's goals here in Dunedin.